Well, many thanks for staying with us on Daybreak right here on Citizen TV. Social Square is the name of the segment that we're getting into right now. And we want to find out from you, what sort of pressure are you experiencing at the stage of life that you are in right now? Is it pressure to buy a house, pressure to buy a car, pressure to get married, pressure to look successful in the eyes of your relatives? And I can keep going on and on and on. Let us know. 2242 is our SMS line. The hashtag is Daybreak. You can call in as well, 0719 777 777. We'll keep displaying those numbers on the screen as we go along. But my panel, they've willingly decided and agreed to come here and share, be very vulnerable with us in terms of the kind of pressure they are facing. Wow, the smiles they're giving me are not very encouraging ones. So I'll start with Stacey Chepkemoi, politician, student and entrepreneur as well. Your pressure has actually been chronicled in one of the papers recently. Feel free to share with us whatever part of that you can. Okay.
What I'm going through is because I joined politics when I was at 24. I just graduated at Maseno University. Then I started my master's. That is in 2016. Then at the end of 2016, that time I was the youth leader. I was elected the youth leader in the county of Bomet. At some point, I was looking at the gaps that young people are, the problems that young people are going through, pale mashinani. Then I decided, what of these positions that these elected leaders are in, and they are not helping us to solve unemployment, we are not getting government tenders, we are not getting any assistance from our leaders, such that every time they come, they only give us handouts, they don't even address our issues. We are not integrated with the other generation or the other stages. So I decided what position is fit for me to actually articulate youth issues and advocate for young people like myself. So I decided, let me run for Senate. At that time, I was 24 in 2017. Then I really faced a lot of challenges. One, I didn't have finances. I was campaigning using a very small vehicle, a Vitz. But
oh, wow. Okay.
Apparently, I came third. We were 9 contestants. I was the only lady. I was the youngest among them all.
But there was an issue that some of the opponents would bring out. But the issue that was coming out was people were asking, what is this young girl telling us, like the male contestants? Why is she coming for a seat that is like male-dominated? You're not even married. So I really didn't bother. I just focused on what I was. How many times did you get that?
I got it so many times.
Married.
I got it so many times. Every time I went to speak, every time I went to articulate my issues on what I want to do for the people of Bomet as a senator, when the other male contestants came, they would say no, because I really had a lot of support. I was very young, I was very small. So every time I had so many support from women, from young people. Then it even got worse when I got nominated for the East African Legislative Assembly. That was after I lost the Senate. I campaigned, and then it never worked. Let's not talk about that. It is now up after, where I'm getting the pressure is after these leaders have been elected. I went back to do my master's at DISTA. That's where I'm currently studying. Is when I start going back to the county, because there's the elected senator. So we are trying to really look at the problems that are still there. The elected leaders are not sorting the youth issues.
Yeah, so is this pressure from the people in the village, or is it even
No,
here?
in politics when you lose, in politics when you lose, that's the beginning of another campaign. So when the leaders that are there, for instance, the senator, he's been financing so many people to like attack me because I'm still present on the ground.
Okay, we're not going to get into that because he's not here.
Yeah,
my question to you is, at any point have you considered getting married to make it easier for you to achieve your dreams?
No, I've not considered that. But every time I air out my issues that attract the public, many of those who don't agree with me would tell me, you get married first.
Have you felt the need to explain why you're not married?
I actually made a post that's on my social media, and I didn't actually explain that why I need to get married or why I don't need to get married. I was just trying to tell people that we don't have to be married for us to come into public office. It's not a yardstick. Okay. Yes, and you cannot use that to judge someone. That you cannot get elected because you're not married. We've seen so many married people who are in office and we are still complaining of their lack of service to the people. So it's not about who marries me, it's not about my husband, it's about what I can do for the people.
Okay. Amina, what kind of pressure do you go through?
First of all, it's quite unfortunate that marital status has become a qualification to hold an office. We should be talking about people who hold or don't hold degrees. But because it even went to the Supreme Court. But I mean, in today's life, young people are experiencing pressures, whether it's self-imposed, societal imposed, whether it's career, whether it's business, whether it's age. There's one way or another that you're experiencing pressure. And for me, on a personal note, it would be career. The legal profession is not it's not a short term. Yeah, it's not for the faint heart as well. So there's also that pressure that you want to finish, you want to be admitted to the bar, you want to make money out of it, or you want to progress in your career before a certain age as well. And because of the constraints of the profession, by the time you get admitted to the bar, you're 27, 28. So that's when you're starting to make a living as well, or when you're expected to make a living. So in by itself is a pressure that no one wants to talk about.
In the world that you grew up in, and that's not just your family, your friends, your society, etc., what should one have achieved by 20? What should one have achieved by 30 and by 40, roughly?
From where I come from, there's just one. By 20, you be married and out of our house. So,
end of story.
The end of story. The rest are additionals. So, but
20.
Yeah, you should be having 4 or 5 kids.
So according to the people back home now, you're not exactly the
I am holding people's camels hostage.
Dominic, you've been dealing a lot with students as well. What are their priorities and what do they say are the pressure they're facing from either their parents or even the society themselves? Because there's what Amina is saying, there's self-imposed pressure and then there's the external pressure coming from the people around you.
No, so you want me to first of all to speak about them, not mine. Okay,
you want to as well, because you also have your own.
Yeah, so, okay, well, I've been lucky enough, in my line of work to, having worked with people, it kind of bounces on you, what you actually need to be aware of. So more or less, I don't experience that much pressure, but sometimes you hear that vibe, people mentioning to you, Dominic, you're doing well, why don't you get married now, So that idea comes, so, but you're like emotionally, psychologically, you're not ready for it, but it comes. Sometimes directly, people tell you directly, sometimes tell you, Chinyamaj, you get the vibe that, what, Dominic, now it's time to be a dad or something. Like, well, it's not an achievement as such, So, but the pressure that I experience is what I think the two ladies have mentioned. And one of them is the biggest one, actually, I think, because of our culture, is still on marriage. I hear this a lot, Hear this a lot.
It's coming out in this panel discussion.
Yeah, it's coming
quite a bit,
quite a bit, that you ought to get married, right? You're a lady, you ought to get married. So, and then there's a bit of career. One of the things that we are actually, the correlation that has been found, especially between Instagram and depression, is because Instagram is the biggest self-comparison, the platform, if you want to say. So this is the place where if you want to experience what comparison does to your psyche, that's the place to go. And so much that it causes actually stress and depression among young people, because you see what people are doing, and yet it is all filter, it's all Photoshop, there's so much behind there. But even though we can see and understand that this is not the reality, still our mind picks that this is the reality. The virtual reality should translate, to what is really in real life. And so
that is a very big concern, because we already know this is not real. Then how does our mind then make us believe that it is real?
You see, the mind picks what you feed it, Your intention creates your reality. So what is your initial intention? Okay, so if your initial intention is the fantasy that is out there should be my reality, your mind tries to make that to reality. But now you're trying to force your mind to pick something that's not real. And so there is what in psychology we call a sort of a cognitive dissonance, okay, where there is a dissonance between what is the fact and I mean what is real and what you're trying to force your mind to accept. And so something has to give.
One way or the other.
One or the other one has to give.
Before Cindy comes in, can age pressure, can peer pressure be positive? I'll give you an example. For me, moving out of where I grew up was a factor, was a...
Inspired
by those who are around me,
yes.
who are slowly leaving and asking me, boss, you're still staying at home. You need to get out.
Yes, yes.
If I had been left to my own ways, where I was very comfortable and everything had been provided for, and I knew where I was going, I'd have to start sort of afresh. Can it be positive?
There's, I don't know if it's Mahatma Gandhi who said this, that you are the sum total of the 5 people you take coffee with,
Wow.
So
okay, 5 people you take coffee with?
Yeah, so The thing is, I try to use peer energy to show that peer pressure is negative, but peer energy is good.
Oh, peer energy,
you know, and that's where the African saying says that if you want to go fast, walk alone. But if you want to go farther, walk with others, you know.
Okay.
So people who, you know, peer energy can actually be very positive. He's an entrepreneur, and I'm sure he will be mentioning to you that if you want even to succeed in entrepreneur, then your network, you know, how much you grow it, how much you are able to get people involved in your vision, you know, the further you're able to go. So peer energy can be absolutely and actually very, very essential. I'll be talking about Harvard study on adult development in a few.
Okay,
to show about
on the same. With that inspiring quote there, Cindy, what you going
I
through?
don't have a Harvard study, sorry.
Not even at University of Nairobi. Right?
No, none.
But you're in the media, you're facing a different kind of pressure.
Yes.
What has your experience been like?
Oh my gosh, the pressure is still there.
Onekana
Instagram
kwa
is
TV.
so
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
I think we came from a generation where celebrities, so-called celebrities, were highlighted in newspapers. This was before the advent of Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp. So we'd go through newspapers and then we'd do these paper clips and then we'd stick them on the books, and it developed this culture of worshipping people and thinking that they're larger than life, that the moment you're in front of the camera, you're behind the microphone. You know, you drive the certain kind of car, you live in the certain kind of place. And personally, in my career in media, there was so much pressure. Oh my gosh, let me bring it all the way back, TBT. Well, when I was still, my advent in media, right here at Royal Media Services, when I started at Hot 96, I didn't have a car. I used to be picked at 4 in the morning with everybody else doing the rounds around these lands, and then the show ends at 11, and come rain, come sunshine, there I am in a matatu, and someone is like, you're seated next to me, I just heard you on the radio, what is wrong with you? You know what I mean? So there was so much pressure to buy a car, to live at a certain place, to take my son to a certain school, because you know, people ask you, so why are you taking your son? You're like, you know, there's Nairobi Primary. A government school? How dare you let down us celebrities? There's a lot of pressure, but I feel that this pressure is put on, you know, it's self-imposed. There's also the pressure that society is fed through the blogs and the newspaper clippings, and, you know, this aura of you have to live a certain way if you're in the public limelight. And, you know, there's also the pressure that, unfortunately, and I hope we'll talk about this, the economy is forcing young people in the so-called middle class to live. It's really very difficult to live in this country, even more difficult to live in this city. So we need to ask ourselves, why is it that people are going the extra mile just to pay bills, just to have a good time? Right.
Why is that? Why is that? The economy, we'll come back to that actually. But Houston, you share with us your thoughts, what your journey has been like.
Yeah.
And for you, I could ask you, when you've hit the kind of milestone that you have, whatever you've achieved, and we'll give you a chance just to briefly share, is there pressure now to keep achieving?
Yeah.
And what happens when 6-7 years later you haven't managed to top or to reach where you were some time back? How do you face yourself?
Yeah. So most young people would consider me successful. So I tend to, let me say, I don't have pressure. I tend to be the one that gives people pressure when I walk into a room. And
alone.
Yeah, there's levels.
As we speak.
Yeah, but you see, the reason why I don't have pressure is because certain fundamental truths are fixed for me. You know, the implication of pressure is that you are responding to it. You see, if you try and abuse a rock, there is nothing that it can do to respond. There's nothing in it that feels what you're saying. So actually, a lot of the things that people say they feel pressure about, and this is not necessarily to judge anyone, is that it tends to be a reflection of their own view of themselves or an expectation in themselves. So they won't communicate it with their own words, but when the words come from outside, it hits something that is already inside, and it causes you to react.
Just waiting to be.
And a lot of that actually can't be blamed on individuals, because pressure originally was good. it kept society going in a certain direction, and the people who came before ensured that the pressure was applied on the back, but there was a way that they had provided on the front for you to go into. So like, you know, the Simba that young men had to build, you know, you didn't struggle with unemployment or whatever, whether you were just doing your father's job or something else. So while they were giving you the pressure, they had provided the means by which you would not find that to be something that's negative. So I have the privilege of not having pressure, because the fundamental truth that exists in my mind is that I am made in the image of God. It doesn't matter whether I live in Kibera or Kikuyu or Lavington. It doesn't change the fact that I'm made in the image of God, and therefore nothing from the outside can shift that. And then it frees me up to now create opportunities for others. It's sad that the former generations have not created the opportunities for us to express our giftings. You see, there's nothing worse than being made in the image of God, and God is a God who works, like He created the universe. And then you come into, you know, a space where 1 million young people are entering the job space, and the economy is only providing 10% of those jobs. The effect that it has on someone who has the image of God on them is dehumanizing.
Let me ask you this, Houston. And first of all, I must say you'll make an amazing motivational speaker. I'm taking notes.
I'd join his church.
You join his church. Or church, so preacher and motivational speaker. So there's a young man watching this program. By the time you're done, he's charged up, he's fired. I'm not going to feel pressure. It's going to be okay. He goes to bed tonight. He wakes up tomorrow. Reality is still facing him. He's forgotten what you're saying. Honestly, how is that guy supposed to cope? He doesn't have you by his ear every day telling him, forget the pressure, you're a rock. You don't need this. But there's the realities on the ground. How does he?
And I'd also like to know why you always like this, because it's easy for you to say that right now, because you're talking the Forbes 30 under 30 most promising entrepreneur. What of that young man who doesn't have anything, like what guys saying? Why you always like this? Or is this something you built over time? So
my parents actually started out in Kawangware, in a really tiny single room. That's where they began. And because of what they believed, they didn't let that hold them down. And so they sort of ensured that I had an education, and which is something that, you know, I sort of thrived in. And so, again, I admit, you don't choose the parents that you have. You don't choose the brain that you get.
You don't choose the circumstances with which you grow up.
Where your life begins. However, part of the challenge with our country is that we don't have a sort of Churchill that speaks at the national level and rallies up the hearts of the people, especially the youth. So that is a huge problem, because we don't have people that cause us to want to achieve more, to want to do more for ourselves and for the people next to us. And then when you look at the common places where that would be provided, you know, from churches or whatever, 90% of them are just Ponzi schemes. It's just, they're selling hope. And there's nothing worse than being in a position to inspire people, and yet you're doing it fraudulently to make yourself rich and you be the one to drive the Range Rover. So I'm admitting that, yes, there's, you know, when you have a headache or a toothache, I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you keep it going for a week, you are in a bad mood the whole time. You can't think straight. You wake up tired. You go to bed tired. That's the sort of thing that young people are experiencing. And one of the ways to
permanent toothache.
And so you really can't think beyond. How do you talk about becoming an entrepreneur and you haven't eaten that night? Where do you even begin? So probably I would say one is that the same young people that are caught in that bind are stuck in a cycle where they are the majority in this country, and every leader that we have today is directly something that can be mapped back to a young populace that chose them. So number one, make the right choices. And then number two, surround yourself with people who who think beyond what your circumstances are.
And Dominic, I'd like you to jump in onto this. Is that where the missing gap is, where we get support? There's psychological support, and then there's inter-support. People say teach a man how to fish and he will feed himself for the rest of his life. But also others argue that at least give me the fishing rod after teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there should be a lake nearby, because if you have a fishing rod and there's no, there's no lake, there's nowhere to fish.
No lake. So is it the inter-support? Is that where the missing gap is?
It's a big one. See, let's say you grow up in a family where your parents were always busy because they're living from hand to mouth, right? So they don't have time to bond with you and to help you to have the necessarily emotional and psychological skills and strengths for you to be able to deal with the world. Okay, so when you go in the world, you're coming as a person who is very insecure, all right? Because the bonding that you need from your family was not there. So you're already coming with a sense of insecurity. Now, multiply that, in a country of 50 million people. So you're having a bunch of very insecure people transferring insecurity towards each other. And so we start on social media and across. So we start measuring ourselves against each other. So what do I have to feel this hole of insecurity? So I yearn for that degree, then I yearn for that car, then I yearn for that man or that woman, So there is always this vicious cycle that I'm trying to fulfill. And it starts from the very important social support. So what you're saying is indeed very, very true. So recently, I don't know if you watched, just a week ago, we need role models. But then what happens when role models collapse? Martin Luther last week was, it was found that he was a big womanizer, right? And he
it's
watched...
been a secret for... It's been discussed
just been discussed, but now it is official.
Oh, it's public, okay.
Yeah, and he saw a pastor raping a woman, and he simply encouraged him to,
The Martin Luther?
The Martin Luther King Jr., right?
This is something that's been made official?
Yeah, now it's official now. Now it's official now. Yeah?
Okay.
So, now what happens when I am a young man who has been looking up on Martin Luther as my role model? Now, this collapses everything, because it is not from internal. The values that I had imbibed from Martin Luther, I had not internalized them as me. So the social support that I was leaning on has collapsed. Now, what do I do?
But what is a role model, though? Because we live in a society where we have young girls who dress scantily, take trips around the world, and they're called role models. We live in a society where, we have politicians who are very, disparaging against women, but when you see their comments, oh, you're doing so well, you're my role model. We see thugs who are masquerading on Instagram, and people are calling them role models. Who are role models?
I think what has happened is that we've separated the model from the role.
Yes, correct.
You are a role model. You are a mother. That's your role. You are breadwinner. That's a role. You can do both. That's the role. But right now, it's just people modeling glitz and glam without any roles that make sense to society.
That makes sense to society.
So
also materialized.
Pardon? And also?
I think we've also materialized everything, such that success depends on the car that you drive, depends on where you live, depends on the school that you take your children. I think we should look at what can you do. Look at your passion, look at what you want to achieve, and streamline it, so that when I look at Wahiga, I don't look at you, you're a media personality. I've chosen politics, so that I don't get driven by what you've achieved, but what I want to do and how to achieve that, and have a passion for it.
How different would your life be if you did not have to please anyone? When you look back over your life, what choices would you have made differently?
I think I would really be doing so well, because I would be living a quiet life. I wouldn't be waiting. Yes, I would not be bothering about if I post a photo, then someone would say, Stacey ata amekonda. Ata she had added weight. Like when I was running, I was very tiny. Now people say, Stacey, you have to go to the gym. Those are some of the comments I have to go through.
The decisions you make by their comments.
When I make a comment like it's really very cold today, someone says, we told you the other day, get married.
Wow.
Those are the things that some of us really have to go through.
Yeah.
And it's really, really not nice. But if you focus on what you want to achieve, then I don't think that can bring you down.
You want to try that?
I mean, I think society also has set a whole level of standards of perfection that we have to keep. We have to keep trying to emulate or trying to achieve, and these standards of perfection keep changing day by day. We also live in an age of social media where everyone's posting something that is perfect. So you're going to post your perfect relationship, you're going to post your perfect home, your perfect babies, your perfect pregnancies, and this yes, and this expectation of you to meet that perfect image that society glorifies or celebrates keeps changing. So you wonder, well, yesterday was 60 kgs. Why am I trying to achieve 50 today? And because that's what society expects you to continuously have or to continuously achieve. And we forget that this is filtered, this is modeled, people are paid to model these lives. But that is what is imposed on you as your standard of perfection. And that is what is celebrated. But life in its real sense is not perfect. No one tells you that. No one tells you the story behind that perfect picture.
There needs to be a unit called Life is Not Perfect. It's from Standard 1.
Yeah. And you can, and no one also tells you cannot be good at everything. You know, if you are, good for you, God bless you, but 90% of us are struggling to find that one thing that we're really good at, that one thing that we're perfect at. Not even perfect, that one thing that we can survive the day with and make a living out of, or give it, or be the reason that we wake up from our beds. No one tells you that story. And the society will continue to impose on you stories of, oh, that person is perfect, their life is perfect, these are the conditions to achieve, this is how to live your life. Cindy is saying that there's even schools for a certain class of people. This is the amount of money you should have in your bank. So people want to live that lifestyle, and they will live it at any cost. Imagine in this economy. You borrow from Peter, you want to pay Paul. And Paul will come next, you have to find someone else to borrow from. In this day and
age. If the government is borrowing, so what are we citizens supposed to do?
So for you to sustain, for you to sustain that lifestyle, there are also some values that you have to give up. There are some things that you will also have to give. Morals, values, things that you will have to give up to attain it. So at what cost? Yes. So at what cost are we willing to live that perfect life that society has imposed? And some we've imposed on ourselves. We also want to fit in. As he said, if you're not comfortable with who you are, you'll want to fit in that perfect image.
I think there's a cultural component to it that maybe sometimes gets overlooked in the sense that, so for example, we as Africans, we respect our elders. So the pressure tends to come from the oldest all the way to the young. We never revert that pressure back. So for example, when you're growing up, you're asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? You actually grow up, you finish college, when are you getting a job? And it goes on and on. When are you getting married? You get married, when are you getting a child? And so the pressure tends to come. The pressure from the peers is supported from pressures from above, but we don't revert it. We don't fathom you telling your parents, why are your age mates stealing from the country, for example? Like we don't take it back. So because we don't question authority, we only take the pressure, but we don't apply the same pressure upwards, and it ought to be two-way traffic. So that really is something that should be
But if you push back, you're considered disrespectful, you're a rebel, you're an outcast, you're the black sheep.
Yeah, so
does anyone really want to pay that price?
But that needs to change, and the more we talk about it, and so long as you do it respectfully, because you don't gain anything by being abusive, but it needs to happen more and more. The other thing about our culture is that we are really, people say Africans are very social, but most of the time we are clueless about how to hold meaningful conversations. So instead, like today, when I show up at the office, someone will say, hey, Leo nenda wapi? What is there a date or something? So instead of them just telling me you look nice, we ask questions. And so you find that an auntie might say, mnatuletea mtu lini? But really it's not that she wants pressure, it's that she doesn't know how to begin a conversation with you. She doesn't know how to connect. And so when you take it at face value, sometimes you take that pressure and then you hear it from a lot of people, but really they're just trying to talk and they don't know how to start.
So Trevor, what are you going to Not right now?
No,
okay, let's take the break. We'll talk later.
We have 5 SMSs and several tweets coming through. Should we read some of them right now? And also later on, We'll talk about parental guidance as well. We're living in a society where one day I'm in Nairobi driving a bicycle, riding a bicycle, but when I go back home with a Land Cruiser, all of a sudden, I am a jatelo, quote unquote. Parents don't ask you where that money came from. They know very well that you can't afford it, but they don't ask you. And if anything, they support you and even inspire you to be a legislator. Let's read up some of the tweets coming through. And 22422 is the SMS line we have. First one, comment.
Mildred says, pressure is everywhere and cuts across society's demography and classes. It makes us insane and insensitive at some point. I believe our legislators are driven by some peer pressure to reside in the city's leafy suburbs and are now fighting to retain hefty house allowances they recently awarded themselves as a part of that peer pressure. He continues by saying that, let's just see what next. Still, this is 22422. We're always advised to consider an honest no rather than an insincere yes just to drift along. It may be very costly, okay?
Let's see another one here with the SMSs coming through. It's still comment. That's the last part. That's the last part of it where he was saying that we are always advised to consider an honest no than an insincere yes. Let's bring up another one coming through to our studios. 22422 is the number. Hosni Gran says the external pressure in today's world comes from social media. You want to be like your friend on Instagram. The fake social media life is imposing a lot of pressure on our youth.
All right.
Right.
And the hashtag is Daybreak. Agapetas Wamalwa. We all aspire to achieve in life, and as human beings, we believe life is sweet at a certain age. Therefore, pressure comes in when we miss out on the achievements of that certain age. For example, if you haven't achieved what you thought you'd achieve at 30, by 30.
Olum, we have another one there that just passed through. Let's go back to Olum Justice. Age pressure is a real menace in current times. It is hitting youths very hard. Our youth must learn to live in realism and within the confines of their earnings. It is impractical to raise your living standards on debts.
Okay. I believe we have at least one more. Engineer Lazaro, pressure from friends and the family almost got me into illicit relationships after breakup of my first marriage. Okay, my goodness. Thank you for sharing that.
Amoy Brian says there's a lot of pressure, especially for the people between 20 to 25 years. This is where the struggle to be successful kicks in. You seek to be independent, but circumstances at times don't allow. When you see others doing it, you feel a lot of pressure to be on the same level as them. All right. A lot of pressure coming through from the people out there.
Yes, yeah. a lot of pressure. We still have some talking points around this topic on your return. Let's take a quick break and weigh in. 22422 is the SMS line. The hashtag is Daybreak.
Will you also share some of your pressure that you asked me? Being a media
Let's talk during the
personality.
break. We'll talk during the break. Yes, but that is true. I have some thoughts.
And married to a media personality.
Yes.
And
double pressure.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's more like I should bring him a seat over there. Because now after marriage, people are like, so what next?
We are due for that break.
We are still waiting. I mean,
let's take a break. We'll be right back.